Being understood is overrated. Hear me out. What I mean by that is a lot of my journey, I thought that I needed people to understand me. I thought that I needed people to like figure me out so that we could have a connection or feel like we could have a real relationship. And to me, now that I'm older, that's furthest from the truth. Being understood is lovely. It's nice when people can understand you and just respect you for who you are and represent yourself to be. But most people still really won't care to understand you. They're going to base it on superficial things, which a lot of humans do. Do I like the way they look? Do I like the way they smell? Do I like the way they talk? Do I like the way they emotionally express themselves? Do I like the way they have confidence and take over the room, right? A lot of this has nothing to do with you being understood, right? These are projections and perceptions of what people want you to be until they get to know you. That's when you meet a lot of people. They're like, man, when I first met you, I thought you were going to be like this. I thought you were going to be like that. And you're totally different. And sometimes that's a compliment. Sometimes it's like, yeah, the different is good. Sometimes it's not a compliment. Like, yeah, the different is like, you're not who I thought you were. And I don't want to be around you because you make me feel judged. There are those situations too. So that's why I said being understood is not that important as it seems, because a lot of the times people are going to purposely misunderstand you, or they're going to inadvertently misunderstand you just based on their own conditioning. And so no matter how much I try to present myself a certain way or speak a certain way or be a certain way, you're going to only receive it the way you know how. And that's the part where I had to learn, like, I don't need them to understand how I think per se, but how I feel about what I think is the thing that I have learned was most important to me growing up, because a lot of times I think all of us have this experience. I think that is just at least the US conditioning, because I can't talk about other countries, but in the US, the conditioning is you're gonna have to learn a lot of stuff by yourself with a lot of people around you. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like, yeah, there's tons of educators and there's tons of people around and friends and coworkers, but no one is really actually trying to understand you. They're just trying to understand the task, right? They're trying to understand whatever this task is at hand. May it be schoolwork, may it be actual work, may it be just keeping the relationship afloat type of work, right? There's so many things that come down to why that we don't usually give answers to, but we just accept it as the social norm and we go along with it. And so for me, what I've been doing again is deconditioning. I'm always deconditioning until I leave this earth. Remember, it took almost 40 plus years of conditioning for me to get to a place of, or I would at least say 20 plus years of conditioning, that the next 10 years or 20 years was unpacking. And now I'm at the point where I'm finally putting it back on the shelf and organized the way I want, right? If that makes sense. Because again, a lot of the things that as a kid we wanted our families to understand about us, or we wanted teachers and people who we looked up to as mentors to understand, and they just, some saw us and some didn't. We just wanted, or even our peers, we wanted our peers to just get us and just like us for who we are. But the reason I always go back and forth between kids and adults is because whoever their parents are at home is usually who that kid is out in the public. It's just a combination of both. And they're like, that's little me. But I'm like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because a lot of the times, little you is not just the things that look like you, but also the things that act like you. And depending on who you are, that's what you're putting out back into society. So that's why I'm always kind of like at that space in life where I'm like, being understood doesn't really matter, because until people know who they are and until people want to know who they are, they're never going to understand you. They're never going to understand anyone around them. They're only going to understand the conditioning and the, I'm going to say, the byproduct of that conditioning that garnered them favor. So again, if being loud and mean at home got them what they needed, then they're probably going to replicate that at home, outside. Or if they can't be loud and mean at home, they're going to replicate it outside. Because again, it's the angel and the devil on the shoulder. Unfortunately, it's just how trauma is transmuted. Either you become the villain or you become the hero. You try to save everybody from the trauma. That's where I used to be. Or you become the villain and you add to the trauma. And I've also been on that side, which is why I'm able to be in the middle and say, listen, it's always going to feel overwhelming when you're on one side holding up the weight of your darkness, right? If you're always in the light, trying to be the light, it's always going to be heavy trying to hold up your darkness. And somehow, some way, your darkness is going to become distorted and evil to you if you do that, and you're going to try to fight it more, which makes you even more dark. Same in the darkness. Embracing your darkness is beautiful, but only identifying as your darkness in the darkness does you no service, because now you're just mad at the world for not knowing your value. But it's like, well, you hid in the darkness, you thrive in the darkness, you're not showing anyone your light. So the light will always blind you, which is another intensity, right? There's heaviness of darkness, which is dense, and then there's the intensity of light, which is bright, which is, I don't think I can handle that. And so until you step and play in both worlds, which means you understand yourself, you're learning the parts of yourself that really matter to you, that's when the understanding of, as long as I know that about me, that I can go this far into the light, I can go that far into the darkness, I can go this far down, I can go this far up. Knowing that you are in control of that is what then allows you to be understood by the right energy, right? Because there's been years when I used to, right before I started talking about, I swear to God, I don't remember, it was way before 2018. And I was just always talking about emotional intelligence. And everyone was like, you always talk about this. Because I was like, none of you have it. And when I would talk about it, no one knew what it was. And it drove me crazy, which also made me feel like, because at the time, it was only talked about in the corporate realm. And it was always done in a scientific way or a very mechanical way of, here's these type of personalities you could be. And here are the type of personalities that you might manage. How do you take your personality with these personalities and get a good outcome? Blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it was used for, versus for the regular people who are out here being chaotic to each other, being like, that's just romantic. That's just who they are. They only strangled me a little. That's not normal. So you need to understand the level of emotional intelligence it takes to let yourself get there, and why you're okay with people pleasing to the point of death. Okay? Like, there's a lot of people out there willing to sacrifice themselves for others and to entertainment to the point of death. So that's why I say being understood don't mean nothing to me, because if you're trying to prove who you are to the point that you might hurt yourself, or I might have to hurt myself just to prove to you who I am, no, don't do that. Do not do that. That's why I never liked friendships where they were based on hazing, because it's like, how far are you going to take it before you take your own self off the grid, right? Or somebody else, or hurt somebody. That's why I say it's important to understand why you want to be understood. Don't just do it because, oh, these people look like me, or these people have a special interest like me, so that means everything about us is the same. No, it's just a little bit of a sliver of connection to show that you're not alone, but it's still your journey to understand that who you become and who you are in the process of letting go of things that no longer serve you and making space for things that you want to grow. That's the part that you have to understand. So that when you do meet new connections and you meet new people, or you're in a situation where you're speaking and you feel like no one's listening, that's a sign to me to say, I'm not supposed to be in this room, right? Instead of trying to fit in and over-explain myself and try to be understood, I'm just going to recognize and peep game like, they just don't want me here. So duly noted. I'm still going to continue to be me and shine, but I'm also making my way out the door and finding other opportunities and avenues that suit me best. So that's why I say it's important to learn yourself first. Learn yourself first. I know it was hard because family dynamics forced us to learn families first. And I think that honestly is the distortion of a lot of people, where I'm not saying family's bad, but people distort the type of families they create based off their trauma and trauma bonding. And then the culture of that trauma bond becomes their life and identity. And that's the part where I'm like, I don't need to be understood that bad. It's not necessary. Because then at that point, you're just a drone. You're not who you are. That's why you got to be really mindful when you go to any situation where you know the only thing you're sacrificing is your autonomy. So choose wisely who you need to be understood by. Anyways, I hope this makes sense. Love ya.